Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about the basics of digital art, everything you need to know to get started. If you don't know me, I'm Maryam. I'm a children's illustrator. I've written and illustrated books, but at one point I was a beginner too, and that's what this video is all about. This video is split into 3 parts: what you need, some very basic concepts of digital art, and a drawing tutorial. So what do you need? What do you actually draw on? I use an iPad Air 5th generation, but you definitely don't need this. Any kind of tablet or iPad, anything where you can download an app to draw on will do the job to begin with. Remember, all we are doing right now is getting started. So what do I use to draw? This Apple Pencil. I use an iPad, so of course the Apple Pencil is the best thing to use with it. However, again, you don't need this. When I was first starting, I used a very cheap, generic stylus. It wasn't anything fancy, but it did the job. Something I love about the Apple Pencil is that it has pressure sensitivity. I'll explain more about this later on. Next, we're going to talk about drawing apps. There are so many options out there these days. It can be a bit confusing, but here are a few recommendations, and here is a free option as well. But the one that I love to use is Procreate. It's not an option for everyone because it only works on iPads, but I love it, and later on in the tutorial you will see why. This is what the app looks like when you open it up, and you can see all of my drawings in folders here. Next, we're going to talk about 2 things you need to understand if you want to make digital art: brushes and layers. Let's begin with layers. So this is a big difference between traditional art and digital art. To explain the concept of layers, I'm going to use this line illustration. I think the best way to understand layers is to imagine them as big, transparent sheets of paper. Then imagine you are drawing on each individual transparent sheet of paper, one for the background, one for the sketch, one for the colour, one for details, and so on. When you stack all the pieces of paper together, they form your illustration. Here you can see all the layers that made up this illustration. Let me explain further. Let's look at each layer that made up this illustration. First we have the background and my first sketch. Now the great thing about layers is that you can remove them and edit them on their own. So I am bringing down the opacity of this layer so we can go over the messy sketch with a neater one. Now we can remove the messy sketch underneath and we are left with just the neater one. Then we open a new layer and we add our flat colour, and then our layer on top of that is our shadows. And we add more layers for textures, the face and highlights, and that's our final illustration. So as you can see, I am just toggling between the layers just to show you guys how you can add and remove them and edit them as required. Now let's talk brushes. So digital brushes are brushes that mimic traditional art media. So paint, pencils, markers. So for example, if you want your digital art to look like a watercolor painting, you can achieve that by using a watercolor digital brush. Procreate already has lots of brushes built into the app, or you can make your own. I have made my own brush pack with the brushes that I love to use with my illustrations, so if you would like to get that brush pack, I will leave it linked in the description below. Here I am just demonstrating a few of my own brushes. In the pack we have sketching brushes, texture brushes, brushes for adding flat colour and shadows, everything you need. Earlier I mentioned that the Apple Pencil has pressure sensitivity. This is relevant because a single brush can give lots of different results depending on how much pressure you apply. So this mimics how a real brush or pencil works. Another thing you can do with brushes is adjust the size and the opacity. So here I am just playing around with different sizes and different opacities and showing you the result. Okay, now that we have covered the basics, let's try drawing something. We're drawing a very simple little bird character. So I am just sketching out the shapes. I'm using the sketching brush from my brush pack. My initial sketch is usually very messy, but I tidy it up afterwards, which you will see. But if you've seen my previous artwork, you'll know that my style in general is quite irregular, it's asymmetrical, it's quite rough around the edges, and that's how I like it. I don't like it to be too rigid. I like it to be a bit more flowy, and I think that makes it more fun for children's illustrations as well. But of course, that's only my opinion, and this is my style of art. If you prefer a more symmetrical and neater style of art, then go ahead with that. That's what art's all about. It's about experimenting and seeing what you like. You'll notice here that I draw and redraw things quite a few times. I use the undo button quite a lot. The shortcut for that is double tapping on the screen, if you're wondering what that is. And that's another great benefit of digital art, is that you can erase your mistakes quite easily and as many times as you want. Now we've done our sketch, I'm going to bring down the opacity of that layer and then open a new layer for our line art. The line art is basically just the outline of your illustration, and it goes over the sketch. It's usually neater and it just tidies up the sketch a little. Once we have our line art, I'll just remove the messy sketch layer from underneath. I picked some colours for the colour palette for this illustration. Now with Procreate you have endless options for colours, and I think that's the case with most of these drawing apps. You can make your own colour palettes. The possibilities truly are endless. To get good at picking colours for your art, it might be worth knowing a little bit about colour theory. That probably needs to be a video on its own, so if you would like to know about colour theory and if that would be helpful, then please leave a comment down below and perhaps I can make that in the future. Now I'm just adding the flat colour. I like to use a brush that has a lot of texture, like the one here. I think it gives it more of that traditional art appearance to it. And also I use varying pressure when applying the colour, again just to make it look a bit more textured and interesting. So here I am just changing the layers and I'm bringing the line art one on top of the colour that we just added. Now when I'm using my colours, I can use this colour picker tool and just bring it over to my colour palette and select any colour that I want to use. You just press this button here and it's really cool because you can import any picture or image that you like the colours of and just colour pick any ones that you want. Another tool I like to use is to turn my line art layer into an overlay, as you can see here. An overlay blends with the colours underneath, so my line art layer was dark, so it blended with the blue colours and the yellow of the beak underneath, and that gives it a dark outline, but it matches the colours of the illustration. So the outline now complements the colours underneath instead of it just being a black outline. This is just how I like to do my outlines, but you can do it however you like and try lots of different techniques and see what you prefer. Now I'm using another overlay layer for my shadows. As you can see, I don't need to individually pick out each darker colour. For each shadow, I can just use one overlay layer with a single dark colour, and I can add shadows to all parts of the illustration. And then I'm just going to adjust the opacity of that shadow layer and see how I like it. Now I'm adding highlights, and again I'm using an overlay layer for this, and this time I'm using a light colour. So I picked out a very pale yellow for my highlights, and I'm just going over and adding a little bit of extra highlight just wherever I think it needs it. And that's it. So I kept this illustration very simple so that anyone who is a beginner can easily follow along and create their own simple character. I hope this video was useful, and if you have been thinking about digital art and getting started, I hope this video gave you the motivation and encouragement to just give it a go. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.